Well, hello everybody. We're talking, Gerard, Batten and myself this morning, about something that has really flared up over the last few days, and that's the Elon Musk interference now with regard to the rape gang scandals that has gone through this country. And many of us are very grateful to Elon because of his wide reach of bringing this once again to the fore, which they've tried desperately to bury, as they've buried Tommy Robinson. So we wish to talk about the work that both Gerard and I have done on behalf of Tommy, and to take this a little bit further forward. Gerard, good morning. Thank you for taking the time to come on. And let's have a little chat. Let's go back a little bit and talk about what we did before the court case, which put the contempt of court case, which put Tommy in prison. Both you and the KC, who is the Attorney General. Would you like to take us through?
Jump in there, just a couple of words on what you said. You said Elon Musk had interfered in this. Well, the Labour government accused a problem when it's George Soros, or it's Bill Gates, or it's Larry Fink of BlackRock, or whichever in and interfere and spend lots of money in UK politics. And it's all right when Labour sent 100 activists over to campaign against Trump. Well, Trump won't forget that in a hurry, which is good. And then, of course, Elon Musk has now launched into the attack on our despicable Labour government. And of course, the only reason he's doing that, in my opinion, is because his attention has been drawn to this issue because of what's happening to Tommy Robinson. Because of Tommy Robinson, and Elon has obviously gone and looked at his film Silenced, but without Tommy sacrificing himself, this whole thing would be still being swept under the carpet. And with all due respect to Elon Musk, you know, if you're busy trying to put people on Mars and do various other things, you probably haven't got a lot of time to think to worry about what goes on in the UK. But it's been brought to his attention, which is great. It's a pity that Tommy's had to be sacrificed to do that. And now he is a heavyweight, the biggest, you know, he's the world heavyweight in terms of social media. And now Tommy's got him on his side. I think that's fantastic. And even more fantastic, he's told Farage to get lost, as far as I'm concerned. But that's another story. So, yes, come back to what you were saying. Yeah, I mean, when Tommy went in for the last time, which was October, I think, wasn't it? Me and you had a chat about what we could do, and we wrote this letter to the Attorney General, Lord Hermer. Now, do you want to go through briefly what it said, or what?
Yes, we did it. Let me just say from the outset that we did different letters, but more or less covering the same things. Go through what you wrote, Gerard.
Okay, I think the important thing to stress here, because the libel vulture lawyers will be circling overhead anybody that comments on this case, is we are not saying anything. We are reporting that Tommy has made a film in which he contends certain things. And you can look at that film. It's called Silenced. It's been silenced on YouTube, I think, but it's not been silenced on the internet. So you can go and find it on the internet. You might find it on YouTube because it was up there at one point. It might be back up there. And basically what we said to the Attorney General, I'll just refer to my letter so I don't get anything wrong. We wrote to him saying we were writing to him concerning the contempt of court case against Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson. And his contempt of court, which in actual fact he went against an injunction that had been issued, and technically it's true, he's in court for breaching an injunction. But the point is, the point of his film and the point of breaching the injunction is, how else could he make the case for his own innocence and the fact that an injustice was being done to him? He had no other way of doing it. Newspapers certainly weren't going to report it, and the BBC and the mainstream media certainly weren't going to report it. So he did what he had to do, or what he considered that he had to do. So what I asked the Attorney General to do is to look at this film so that he can review the points that Tommy brings up, And in this film, he demonstrates to Tommy's satisfaction that the original case against him had no basis in fact and was unjust. Now, that film now, when we wrote, I think it had 50 million views. And the last thing I saw, it had 150 million views worldwide. And it's probably had a lot more since then, since the weekend when Musk was saying things about it. Now, if I go through the main points that we put to the Attorney General, which Tommy contends, not us, let me emphasize, what he said was, if all the evidence that was in his possession had been allowed to be heard in court, it would have exonerated him. What Tommy also says is that a number of teachers who could have given evidence on his behalf were pressurized by their employer not to do so, and were allegedly paid large sums of money in the region of £17,000 not to appear in court, and that money was paid by Kirklees counsel. And this, if true, would constitute a perversion of the course of justice. Tommy also contends that the judge in the case took a seemingly arbitrary decision to disregard the evidence of those child witnesses, or were children at the time this incident occurred. And I believe there were 6 of them. I'm not entirely sure on the figure, but I believe it was 6, who would have, Tommy says, testified to the truth of what he had said. And the judge chose not to believe them, but to believe the solitary evidence of the plaintiff, i.e. the person alleging the libel, who was himself a child at this time. So that's what Tommy's saying. Now, after Tommy had finished this film, the judge ordered him not to publish it. This is what we're telling the Attorney General. Now, Mr. Lennon complied with this order, but by the time that happened, it had already been given to interested parties in the USA, and it was these parties that published it without his permission, or and against his wishes. And he had no power to prevent this. This is what Tommy is contending, and it was published on the internet by these people, whoever they are. Now, the contempt of court case was scheduled for October, and what we said to the Attorney General, if I can paraphrase it, the film silence, if Tommy is correct in what he's saying, shows that the verdict of the original libel case was unjust and wrong. Evidence in the original case was suppressed by the judge, according to Tommy. The decision of the judge in the contempt court case was clearly against natural justice and the right of Mr. Lennon to defend himself post-conviction with pertinent and relevant facts. And I made the point here that if people weren't allowed to defend themselves post a conviction, then you would never have known about all the injustices in the past. And I said you can go right back to Alfred Dreyfus in France in 1906, where a long campaign was waged to prove his innocence, and he was eventually freed from Devil's Island. In fact, I think you remember that case. Anyone that doesn't remember it can look it up. Albert Dreyfus, an army captain who was sent to Devil's Island. I think it was for treason. Turned out he hadn't done anything wrong at all. And of course, right through to modern times, when most recently we've had the post office managers scandal. Unbelievable dishonesty on behalf of the post office in prosecuting these people, profess that they weren't responsible for and were in actual fact problems with computer software. And we all know what computer software can do to you. So I said, this injunction was against natural justice because he has then no right to defend himself against what he believes to be an unjust conviction. And therefore I ended the letter saying, I respectfully ask you to watch the film and acquaint yourself with Mr. Lennon's arguments and contentions. Use your power as Attorney General to intervene in the contempt of court case and overturn it, in particular with regard to his human rights, to a fair and unbiased hearing, which, as Tommy says, he says did not occur in the original libel trial. Also, the Attorney General's obligation to promote the rule of law in the UK, as UK law, not somebody else's law. Your power to decide that the contempt of court hearing is not in the public interest, and it will be a denial of justice and Mr. Lennon's natural rights to defend himself post-conviction with facts and arguments, and to publish these to the general public. So we've laid it all out, what we'd like him to do. And we've said, he faces a possible prison sentence, which he then got, of 2 years. I think it's 18 months, wasn't it, all told? This is a kind of last-ditch attempt to highlight the case. So we've asked him to respectfully look at the film and come back and let us know what he thinks. When did we write that? In October? October and early November. We've had no reply, and I'm not expecting to get one. Even when I was an MEP and people were supposed to reply to me, they never did anyway. So it doesn't surprise me that he hasn't replied to it.
As an addendum to that, Gerard, I also asked him if he wasn't going to do anything about the perversion of the course of justice, according to Tommy, by the fact that Kirklees Council had paid these teachers to sign non-disclosure agreements and therefore not attend court. I asked him if he wasn't going to do anything about it. Could he advise me of what I should do to take on Kirklees Council or their legal department? Because this is taxpayers' money that have been paid out to pervert the course of justice if the film is correct. And I've got no reason to doubt that it is correct.
Yes, but also, who should be doing that? That should be local councillors and the MP or somebody in that area of the world. Of course, that's never going to happen, is it? We know that. But you're quite right. But then, of course, you would then, if he told you how to do it, you could probably then immerse yourself in a world of legal red tape and enormous cost. And don't forget, if you take people to court, then you lose your case. You'll be ruined financially as well by the costs of the other side.
Can I just say also, the thing that upsets me greatly, and this comes again if you look back at the postmaster's case, when they won in the High Court and they won a substantial amount of money, it was taken up in their legal fees to take it on in the first place. To me, that is all wrong. The Post Office were proved to be totally incorrect by the judge, and therefore they should have paid those fees. The Post Office people that actually went through the courts should not have had to pay a penny. And this is the whole problem. If Tommy, according to the injunction, Gerard, as I understand the law now, that he could go, he should not have done what he did, okay? What he should have done is gone back to court, not done the film, but not produced, not sent it out, but have gone back to the court with the film. But these things all take money, and I think his legal fees were something like £80,000. The only people making any money out of this is the legal profession. And this is absolutely outrageous. The ordinary man in the street, you and I, who would have been in the same position as Tommy, because we're ordinary people, could not afford to take these people on. And it's done deliberately, so you can't.
Oh, exactly. And I think, I'm not entirely sure about the figure, but the costs against him, i.e. the compensation he had to pay to the person who was found to have been libelled by the court, and his legal fees was something like 1.3 million.
Yeah.
I'm like, so how's he ever going to pay that off? Well, he can't, but the idea is to completely crush him so that he never can never do anything.
Well, his army of supporters like you and I, and there are things that Tommy has done that you and I don't agree with, and I always think of Tommy a bit like a son, really. Sometimes he could do going over my knee and having his backside smacked for being out of line. But there are some things we haven't agreed with, and that's for sure. But in this particular instance, he is a man of the people. Look at the people that have come out on his behalf. And we have still got to keep this in the public eye and pressurize the Attorney General into doing something. And this now brings us to the state of Tommy in prison.
Yeah. In 12th of November, I wrote to, probably a lot of other people did as well, I'm not quite sure, but I did certainly, to the governor of Woodhill prison, a lady called Nicola Marfleet. And what I said to her was, first of all, I'll read it out. So if anybody wants to write to Tommy, his number, because everybody has a number in prison, is, I wrote this in his proper name, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and the number is PA 4546. Now, the latest I've heard is he is inundated, or the prison is inundated with Christmas cards, letters, goodwill messages, and it's taking them quite a while to sort through them, to deliver them to Tommy. So I think that's great. So you might want to send him to an open prison just to stop the cards coming in. But anyway, I said to him, I'm writing in support of a legal notice, which is reference 6734/SW, which I presume was drawn up by lawyers, because I've read it and it's a very legalistic, clear to read document regarding him. And they make a proposal that for a notice and transfer to an open prison. And what I said is this, I'll read it briefly. In short, he was sentenced to a civil and not a criminal offence. His solitary confinement is damaging to his physical and mental health. He would be at physical risk if he was held amongst the general population. He represents no threat to prison officers or other inmates. And his incarceration, especially in solitary confinement, is inappropriate and disproportionate to his offence. And I urged her to uphold his right to fair, humane and appropriate treatment by adhering to established prison guidelines. So we aren't up pleading for some kind of special treatment. This is established prison guidelines about who is convicted of what and where they should be, and that he should be removed to an open prison as soon as possible. I haven't received a reply to that letter, and to be honest, I'm not really expecting to. But I think that anybody that feels concerned should write to the governor of Woodhill Prison. You can look up Woodhill Prison easily enough to get the address, but I'll just read it out briefly. The governor is Ms. Nicola Marfleet, Marfleet, HMP Woodhill, Tattenhoe Street, Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire, MK4 4DA. And as I say, you can easily find that address and details on the internet. So that's where we are. I hope that the intervention of Elon Musk will see him move to an open prison, so at least he's in some kind of decent, humane conditions. I'm hoping to go in and visit him in the near future, within the next couple of weeks. And he is getting visitors, but of course, that's his only contact with the outside world. Other than that, I think he's allowed into the prison gym for an hour at 8 o'clock in the morning or something when nobody else is in there. And for 21 hours a day, he's banged up in his cell, apart from when visitors are allowed in to see him. And they've had to, so I believe, so it's been reported, the entire wing of cells where they put people in prison to solitary confinement has been cleared just so he can sit in there without him being attacked by somebody else he might run into in the corridor or something when he's moving about. So it's like Rudolf Hess in Spandau, you know, when they kept the entire prison open for one man. Tommy Robinson isn't Rudolf Hess, and yet they've kind of got an entire part of the prison which they're refurbing just for him, and he's not allowed to mix. Personally, I mean, he wouldn't want to mix freely with the people that are going to kill him, or with some of them whom would probably like to kill him, who we all know now run many prisons. So he should be moved to an open prison where he can at least have normal, humane conditions and eat proper food without the risk of it being poisoned or interfered with.
I think that's very true, Gerard. And, you know, as ever, you have stood by. You and I go back number of years. Neither of us have ever wavered in our support for Tommy. We've been quite open and honest, and Tommy knows this. But the one thing I love about the man is that when he's made a mistake, he puts his hands straight up. He doesn't hide behind and say, "Oh no, 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 it wasn't me, Gov." He just says, "Yep, I got that wrong. I've apologized for it. I've done whatever for it, and that's it." He's so honest. This is probably half his problem. Is he's dealing with a load of crooks, liars, deceitful. I can't think of an adjective that wouldn't have us shut off this conversation. But he's such an honest and decent chap, and I just despair. I totally despair at the standard of justice in this country. Two-tiering is quite correct. We've all seen this. We've been to rallies, Gerard, you and I, in London, where the TSG, part of the Metropolitan Police Force, have come out with batons raised and battered us all, and yet other where there is violence and what have you, they've either run away as they did in Leeds, or they turn their backs.
Yeah.
It's just
Well,
we're targets, and Tommy is a huge target.
I didn't get battered, but I know you got knocked down and badly bruised by the brave members of the riot squad, or whatever they're called now, when we were out demonstrating against the lockdowns. All the old duffers like us. Excuse me, Liz, I know I'm more an old duffer than you are, but we were out there with our walking sticks, walking about, demonstrating against the lockdowns, and there was quite a few younger people as well, to be fair, and of course the police didn't like that at all. But when you've got the Palestinian supporters spouting Jew hatred in the streets of London week after week, then they just look the other way, and in fact threaten to arrest anybody that objects to the Jew hatred. So we all know it's a two-tier system, unfortunately, and I think that's out of fear. First of all, police officers now are terrified of being accused of racist or Islamophobe, because at worst it will involve them in months of paperwork and investigations, at best it will involve them in investigations and disciplinary hearings, and at worst they could see them losing their job. So you can understand why they're very, very wary of it. And they're also feared because these people, like the kind of people who've been out in the Palestinian marches, are not frightened to use violence if necessary against the police and property. So that's where we are in this country, and it's a problem that's getting worse, and the government are too terrified to confront it for the same reasons.
Absolutely. Can I just make you smile here? I know that you do go with a stick because you had a hip replacement, etc. I didn't need a stick to go to the, but I did afterwards, after I'd been so badly battered. So you had one before, and I required one after. So there we go. Gerard, thank you. We must keep Tommy's case in the public eye. We're very grateful to people like Paul Thorpe and some politicians on the, shall we say, on the fringe of politics that are trying hard.
So yes, if we can give a mention to Lord Pearson, because I was introduced to Tommy by Lord Pearson back in about, I can't even remember what it was now, 2017 or something like that, I'm not sure. And the only reason I saw Tommy was I'd seen him on the media, and I thought, well, if this man talks sense and he doesn't look like far right to me. And Lord Pearson, of course, had gone to the trouble of checking him out and meeting him, and Pearson introduced me to him, and we had lunch in the House of Lords, which was funny because they tried to get Pearson into trouble over that. And that's how I got to know him. And I would have nothing to do with him if I thought he really genuinely was a far right racist thug, etc., which he is not. He's got plenty of black and Asian friends, and he's somebody who argues for the truth of something. He's not from any kind of biased or bigoted point of view. And I've got enormous respect for him. He's extremely brave. He can be rash and reckless, but then you have to think, well, if he wasn't, he wouldn't be doing what he's doing. A normal person like the rest of us couldn't do it. We couldn't take the financial ruin and the sacrifice, personal and financial, that he's had to take. And of course, now he's banged up in solitary confinement in a prison. So I've got enormous respect for him. And of course, I think Musk has seen the same thing. Although he's in America, he's researched this, and he's appalled by the scandal of the rape gangs. And this isn't just happening here. As you well know, Liz, you don't need me to tell you, and the old viewers will know, this is happening in countries like France and Germany and Sweden. It's not a new phenomenon. It's been going on here for 40 years. It's been going on in those countries for years, and it has to be addressed. Something has to be done about it.
The interesting thing, Gerard, is that the biggest city with the largest population of this demographic is London, and there has not been one prosecution in London. What does that tell you?
I must admit, as the MEP for London for 15 years, nobody really came to me with stories about this. I have to be honest about this. Nobody brought it to me and said it was happening in London.
No, probably because
not with concrete examples that could be followed up.
But it's very, very strange, as far as I'm concerned, that there hasn't been anything in. I mean, we've even had people forget down here in leafy Kent, Ramsgate was one of the first places. People don't remember Ramsgate because I think there were only 4 people. This is where Tommy originally got into trouble because the case went to Canterbury Crown Court, and he was, instead of being just outside the grounds of the court, was just inside off the pavement filming. And this is where he got done for contempt of court in the first place, which is absolutely ridiculous. But it was Ramsgate where this was first brought about.
Yeah, and if you remember, he didn't get a prison sentence for that, did he? But he did for the one in Leeds.
Yeah.
And in Leeds, all he'd done is stand outside the court interviewing defendants, or I think they'd already been found guilty at that point, hadn't they? And they were going to be sentenced, and what did they feel about it? And of course, they made threatening and obscene remarks to him about his mother or his wife, I believe. And of course, the judge hauls him in and sentences him to prison for contempt of court. Now, how many times have you seen defendants going into court? Think of Ralph Harris when he went in. There was a complete mob of reporters around him, jostling him, trying to get him to comment. I've come out of court when I've been a witness, and I've had the same, I've had journalists come up to me, what do you think about this? And I said, very well, I can't comment, because if I did, I'd be in trouble with the judge who's just told everybody they can't comment on it until it's over. So the media, the mainstream media, do this all the time with impunity. And he wasn't in any way interfering in a court case because the verdict had already been reached. It was going to be a sentence. So it's completely biased. And in fact, I stood up there was a Free Tommy Robinson rally. I think that would have been after that. So when was that? I think that was in 2018. I'm trying to remember, when I was already leader. And I stood up in Whitehall and said that he was a political prisoner. I've been consistent on that. He is a political prisoner because he's not gone to prison for committing real crimes that have damaged anybody. He's gone to prison for stating facts and opinions which are common currency amongst other people. But when he says it, he ends up in prison because he's a powerful voice, because ordinary people can relate to it, and that's what they hate.
Absolutely right. And the other thing that we haven't touched on this morning is when we get to onto Telford, you and I both went up to the first Telford screening. And after that, I was so appalled. I wrote to the then Chief Constable of West Mercia Police, who happened to be a woman. She was Pippa Mills, a woman. And I said, because Tommy at that time, and if you go by what he said, had proved police corruption and was chasing police officers with a microphone and saying, this is what you've done. And of course, they ran and hid. Now, I said, what are you doing about the investigation? Because Tommy had got all this information and asked the Chief Constable of West Mercia to speak to him or a member of his team, and they would hand over all the information they got. They wouldn't even speak to Tommy.
Yeah.
He had all this information on these corrupt police officers, and they wouldn't even speak. And what upset me even further was that the Chief Constable was a woman. You've got little girls being tortured. I'm not going to go in here of some of the awful things that have happened because I just can't speak about it. But the awful things that have happened, this is a woman in charge of the police who has allowed this to happen. She is no longer there. She's now in the Met. I believe she's been promoted into the Met.
This is because these people are invested in this myth of the multicultural society. We're not talking about now what I would call, private multiculturalism, where people enjoy their different cultures and all the rest of it, which is fine. But this publicly funded state multiculturalism, which is founded on this myth that you can bring in people who have no intention of amalgamating and assimilating to set up distinct and kind of rival societies. And that they know they've made a tremendous mistake. Otherwise, they must do, otherwise they'd be completely stupid. But they cannot now admit it. And to actually say, well, it was a mistake and we now have to try and do something about it. They're frightened that will erupt in some kind of civil disorder in these places. And so they're terrified of doing anything. And indeed, we know, I think it's fair to say, that they've, in their own minds, they've admitted that, in another 20, 30, 40 years, this is going to be an Islamically controlled country. And they've just resigned themselves to it.
Yes.
And even Farage has said something very similar when he was interviewed, we have to reach an accommodation with these people. Well, no, we don't. We didn't reach an accommodation with the Germans in 1940 when they wanted to destroy our society. So why the hell should we reach accommodation with somebody else when we still have the power to stop it?
I couldn't agree with you more. And we've got people in power at the moment who completely turned a blind eye to the fact of Sharia law coming into this country. And all these people standing there waving the banner for women's rights do nothing at all about the fact that Sharia law has come in, where women have got no rights whatsoever.
And if you remember, do you remember during the election period? Now, I can't remember who it was, the Labour high-profile woman. Was it? It wasn't Jess Phillips, was it? It was the other one. I can't remember the name. Sorry, it's gone out of my mind. And she was practically on her knees in a room full of Muslim men, begging them to vote for Labour because otherwise George Galloway would get in. Do you remember that? It was on the TV news. So please vote Labour, or George Galloway get in. Never occurred to that woman to say, well, hang on a minute, where's the female voters? Where are your wives and daughters so that I can tell them too? How can I get to them? No, she was quite happy to talk to all these bearded chaps. And it never occurred to her that they've actually got wives and daughters who were also eligible to vote. Because she knew very well that they were going to vote however the men told them to vote, because that's the way it works. And these chaps, I don't know, but they were probably imams who then go out to the mosque and tell other people how to vote. And they do what they're told because it's a group loyalty thing.
And it's even worse than that, Gerard, of course, is because they've all got postal votes. So they go around and collect all the votes, all the ballot papers, and mark them themselves. We know what goes on. We know better than the Banana Republic, as a judge in Birmingham said a number of years ago, that the postal votes now go to all these people, and they're all collected and by the senior imams, marked accordingly and sent back. In one ward, when I stood in Halifax, 100% of people in one ward voted Labour.
Yeah, sounds
100%. And when you actually went round, and I went round with the list as you get at the time, places were boarded up, and yet these people were still on the voting list, etc. So you know very well.
Joe Biden would be
proud. You're in a mess, Mr. Batten. It's time you came back into politics.
I know.
But we'll leave that for another day.
No, I don't want anybody to get the false idea that because I'm talking to you, Liz, that I'm coming back into politics in any way, shape, or form, because I'm not. I know I don't look it, but I'm 70. I'm too old, and I haven't got the energy, and I wouldn't want to do it anyway. I leave that to other people now, and I'll support people like you. I'm supporting you, obviously, Liz, because you're a good friend. And Peter McElvenna is another chap I support, but this is really about Tommy. I'm doing this for Tommy because
I am just pulling your leg, as you know, and you know that you'll smile at this because I know your feelings and I respect them entirely. I just have to remind you, you might be 70, but I'm nearly 10 years older, so that's no excuse.
I've got more sense than you in this respect.
That goes without saying. Gerard, thank you so much for this morning. and we'll get this out later on today. And we must keep this in the public eye. And as I say, thank you to all the people, particularly people like Paul Thorpe, who have done so much in keeping this, like you and like me, vilified for it, but I just don't care.
No. Yes, and thank you for doing this, Liz. Thank you for all your efforts, and thank you to your viewers for actually supporting you. And I hope you get many, many more.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Liz.